to the Larry the GM website inaugural video. We are going to be talking to you today about the latest article that we posted out about a day ago. On the line with me, and I'm not going to turn off the website, but you have Larry the GM and Clint the Scout. Clint, introduce yourself.
Well, hello, Larry. It's been a while, but yeah, I was excited to be here, and it's time for postseason baseball. So
It's time
this is when the Astros get serious, right?
This is when the Astros get serious, and this is when the Larry the GM website gets serious about the numbers.
Yes.
I mean, we normally do a pretty good job of hammering people with numbers in our articles, but even I recognize when we wrote this one that it would probably take a little bit of explanation. So what we've done is we've created a matchup guide for the ALDS with the Mariners, and as we get into it, we'll kind of talk through expected WOBA and the cross-functional application of the pitching expected WOBAs and the batting expected WOBAs, and how we will predict performance as we cross them up. So, as folks that are, if you have not subscribed to the Larry the GM website, in fact, I was on a Twitter Space chat last night, and somebody said, Larry, you're talking about this website. Is there a way that I can get a notification when you put an article out? And I said, you certainly can. That you subscribe on the website. Now, so that's the way to get go onto the website, subscribe to get email notifications, and you won't have to wait for me to send out a Twitter notification. You'll be an insider. You'll know when something's up there, because sometimes actually, just full disclosure, sometimes the article comes out the night before the Twitter notifications come out. So if you want to be on the latest and greatest, and you want to be the first to know something we put out, then that's the way to do it. So with this article, we've done a series of articles related to this postseason. Started by talking about the pitching. Predictions of the roster related to the pitching. We're going to get into that before we're done here, and show why we made some of the conclusions we made along the way related to that. Then we also, near the end of the season, we did a who's hot and who's not, because a lot of times that can determine what you want to do with your postseason roster. And then we talked about the batting, what the overall batting picture, and my predictions for the lineups. I get into that even more into this matchup guide, and kind of amplify why I was saying the things I've said related to both the batting and the lineup here when you look at the matchups. It's a mountain of data. I don't want everybody to get lost in it. That's why we're doing the video. So folks that have been a member, read anything we put out on Larry the GM will recognize this. This is the league heat map. And it'll be probably something you'll see in multiple articles in the offseason. We're just showing on this the relative strengths of each one of the positions for the Astros. Catcher, first base, and we've got starting pitching, relief pitching. You can go through there and see, with our heat map, red is always good performance for that particular person, and blue is always bad. So that's the way the Rosetta Stone of that. And then you see on the orange line there the relative Astros, how they've done, and that's kind of help building context of understanding the Astros versus the Mariners. The Astros have had the sixth best batting WAR of the year. The Mariners have had the eighth. Now, from a pitching standpoint, you'll see while the Mariners are only rated as 16th best pitching, but guys, they made a very big acquisitions. They traded quite a few prospects for Luis Castillo, and that's had a really good. They're 16th for the year. They've been 8th since the trade deadline as far as their overall pitching. So the Astros fans may be a little dismissive of the Mariners, but we haven't played the Mariners team that we're going to play in the ALDS. I just want to start with that disclaimer. that they have an ace too. And one of the most interesting things is what's going to happen in game one, our ace versus their ace. Or I'm not sure that Castillo is going to pitch in game one, to be honest with you. After the wild card, he may pitch in game two. And if he pitches in game two, that's going to be interesting too, how that works out. So there you go. There's the overall heat map. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but you can dig into it and see where the relative strengths and weaknesses of the team have been, and the strengths and weaknesses of Seattle. So let's start with the Seattle pitching staff, and you'll notice on this, we're looking at an ERA, FIP, WAR, and then we jump into looking at WOBAs, ex-WOBAs, expected WOBAs. I want to emphasize that we're looking not at the actual WOBAs, but what the expected WOBA is, and Clint, that's due to their calculations with statistical stuff that we don't really want to get into too deep, but they look at like exit velocity and stuff like that to calculate an expected WOBA, correct?
Right.
So
I was just going to say, so it's a lot better for us to look at it from this standpoint than it is to compare, obviously prior, regular season numbers. I think this just paints a really good picture of where the Astros obviously will see their toughest matchups, and I know you're going to build into that.
Right.
But I also think it also kind of demonstrates what the value was of that trade line, that deadline acquisition of Luis Castillo and how it's helped that rotation. And I was just going to say, I think Seattle has an interesting decision to make if they go into game one and they lose, to address it and potentially send Luis Castillo out there for game two in Houston, just to ensure that they, to try and go for the split, so that they can bring their guys home. I think that's going to be fascinating, but obviously I'm taking more of a, in-game type of perspective to that. So we'll see. But yeah, I think I think it also kind of just shows that the Seattle team is not bad, and they have a lot of upside.
I mean, yeah, you start with that heat map and you think 16th best pitching staff. You look at this sheet, there's a lot of red on this sheet, guys, and a lot of red here. Luis Castillo being, that expected WOBA 262 versus right-handed hitters. That's a really good number against the dominant side pitching. Now you notice the other thing I'll say here, and we'll get into this even more, but you notice that their top of their bullpen really has that end of that bullpen's really, really good. And you'll notice they're good both against lefties and righties. That was an issue for the Astros last year. It's not an issue this year. We'll get to that one in a minute. But you'll notice that the righty, I think what I say here, the righty starters, the starters are stronger against the left-handed hitters, and the bullpen's stronger against the right-handed hitters. So you can kind of see that. By there's some there's a lot of these guys, even the second, third, and fourth starters are all good against lefties, not as great against the righties. So we're going to be looking for the righties to rake early, and we're looking for the lefties to come through if we get a Matt Brash or Matthew Fiesta in there. We're counting on the lefties in our lineup to rake on them. All right, so that's what we see from that. Let's go to the Houston pitching. And all I can say is just take a pause and understand this. The Astros pitching staff, number one and delivered WAR. Look at all the red, and every player on the top 10 of this pitching staff that's going to be critical in this postseason is red, and all these numbers. And that's one of the things I tell folks is that if you get overwhelmed with the numbers, just look at the color, and just the color is going to tell the story that the number underlying it is giving you the detail on. So you see, how good this pitching staff has been, how good even from a FIP standpoint it is, and how good they've been both righties and lefties. The major Achilles heel that I wrote in last year's article about the Achilles heel of the Astros bullpen does not exist this year. They're very capable versus both righties and lefties. Um, Will Smith, and I get into this a little bit in detail of the article, and also send a link over to another article about Will Smith specifically yesterday. His performance as a Houston Astro is right up there with the rest of the top end of the bullpen, and it went from being an actually fairly pedestrian versus right-handed relief pitcher to just about equal level performance, lefties and righties. That's the 263, 264 in that article. So one of the things we're going to deal with is what about the bottom? So I just took you through 11. If they have 12, which of these three in the bottom of this are you going to take to the ALDS? Because if they only carry 12, Maton, Urquidy, and Garcia, two of them are going to be sitting out. So that's the pitching staff. Let's look at the hitters. So you notice here is that as we look at their batters, the top end of their lineup, I'd say, is the Mariners lineup has been pretty good. But we're going to see that the Astros the Astros have been better. But Julio Rodriguez at 854 OPS, that's pretty phenomenal. Again, generally the top end of the lineup a good versus both lefties and righties. Cal Raleigh, switch hitter, not so good against lefties. Could see a Dylan Moore pinch hit for him, or even pinch hit, and the other catchers on the team being substituted in a critical situation. Jared Kelenic is going to be the one that's really interesting as you look at his performance. Has been, I think the Astros, the Mariners have been at a point with their 23-year-old one of their top prospects, Jared Kelenic. Like he's going to hit, all year long. He's going to hit, and he never really did hit. And he went up, I believe he went up and down to the minors a few times, and he's likely to be. I mean, he's going to be on this roster, I believe, but it's going to be interesting how much they use them, how much they substitute a Trailer Trammell or put Dylan Moore in the outfield. I would fully expect they will put Dylan Moore start him in left field versus the lefty, versus Valdez, and let Kelenic sit because Kelenic just not hit lefties, and his opportunities there. Anything you see with the Seattle hitters, Clint?
I mean, the heat map is obviously a really good indication of where their strengths are.
Right.
I always believe, as you can tell, the pitching's role in this is ensuring that you get the outs that you should when you should, and that's where that 7, 8, and 9 hitters are going to be interesting. When I look at this heat map, I find I'm kind of interested in how this switch hitter roles and Rayleigh and Santana are going to play a factor in decisions that are made with relievers, depending on how the sequencing falls into place. So,
Yes.
And so it's kind of like we get a good feel of how young this team is, number one, and then obviously we have to understand the value in our starting pitching being able to go through this lineup 2 and 3 times and get those outs, especially if they just see the first half of this lineup 3 times and being there for that. But I think basically what it comes down to is how well these pitchers execute in those pivotal moments and being sure you make you make the right outs when they're there.
Right. So interestingly enough, here's the Houston batting, and all right. So full disclaimer, guys, I've put Trey Mancini and Christian Vasquez in this lineup, and I'm doing it like I'm trying to make a point, and so you can think I'm being stubborn because I am, but look at the 7 and 8 hole hitters as I've got them listed here. Trey Mancini versus Yuli Gurriel and Christian Vasquez versus Martin Maldonado. Now, if you want to play Maldonado versus a lefty starter, that's fine. You can go, you can pitch him against a lefty that the Mariners have. But Uh, every single, the data here shows just how incredibly strong. Look at Jordan Alvarez, 447 expected WOBA versus lefties, 40.47. Guys, those are insanely high numbers. The I struggle, like, the red's not red enough on here for that's how red how good that is. And so you can see, one of the things that we're going to get into before we're done here is, where is Dubon, and Dubon versus Manichevic. And you guys are, people around the world may think, why is Larry talking about Manichevic? Just understand. I'm leading you down a path to help you understand why I believe Manichevic should be in this lineup. So, really, I've listed 15 batters here. Only 14 of them are going to really be on the roster. One of these guys will not be on the roster. I have my opinion about who that's going to be. I'll make it clear through this article. But there's the data of the relative strengths of these. Now, some of these guys like Hensley and Manichevic don't have a lot of at bats, so you have to understand what their internal data says about the quality of their at bats in AAA have really been, to know how comfortable they are with carrying these guys. Both of them raked in AAA this year, so let's see what decisions they made. I did see today, and I don't know if you saw this, Clint, but even Dusty Baker admitted that he was not going to planning on playing Dubon in center field in game one. And his words were something like, "We need to be able to have better offense," and something like that. We need better batting than for the postseason. Like, well, finally, finally. It's like, okay. So I don't know if folks remember this. Like, I rode Dusty pretty hard during the regular season last year. I didn't have much to say negatively about the decisions he made in the postseason. So the regular season Dusty, maybe postseason Dusty. Maybe postseason Dusty manages it more like Larry the GM would like them to manage. Let's hope for that. And if he does, there's going to be a consensus about Dubon, and I don't think most people are prepared for it. But we'll see when we get there. All right, so that's the lineups, and you say, well, that's good data there. You didn't really tell me anything. So let's start getting into it. And again, so these tables, go to the website. I guess I should have started there, Clint. Folks need to go to Larry the GM, call up this article as you're going through this with us. The Seattle hitters, what I've done here next is I've given you guys the expected WOBAs by pitch type. So by Julio Rodriguez, what does he do against a four-seam fastball? What does Carlos Santana do against a sinker? This is the data that comes from Baseball Savant. This is data that Clint and I have had many conversations about Jeremy Pena's data. That's this kind of data. So I've done it both the lefties and the righties. It's going to be important as we get deeper into this. But you can see, notice how much the Mariners rake against four-seam fastballs, right? It's just like that, and that's common in the major leagues. But you see how other pitches are not so strong, and then every one of these players has a profile of things they do well and things they don't do as well. So the question is, can your pitcher pitch? Can the pitcher take advantage of the things they don't do as well, and avoid the things they do really well? So that's kind of the basis of where we're headed. So you see the pitch by pitch data here. Then I've given you again the expected WOBA data, overall expected WOBA data in the last call. So let's do so we did the same thing for the pitchers. So this is the Seattle pitchers, and this is how their pitch profiles, the pitches that they pitch, the frequency that they pitch them, and then again how well those pitches perform. So again, a low. Now when we're talking about the pitchers, the low expected WOBA is going to be red because that's what they want to do, right? So there you have it. So if you can follow me, we go George Kirby on a slider, pitched at 10.1% of the time, and pitched it to a quality of expected WOBA of 234. That's really good. So you see what every one of these pitchers has a profile, just like the batters have a profile. Things they do well, things they don't do well. So if you as a batter can get Logan Gilbert into a position where he's going to have to throw you a fastball, you're thinking, hey, as a good strong hitting batter, that's what you want to do. So you notice that the relievers have generally have fewer pitchers than the starters. That's why they're relievers. So you can kind of see the quality of this. So Clint, given what I just said about Seattle, both the hitters and the batters, this expected WOBA data broken down, lefty, righty, the pitch types, and I know you know, and I know you love this kind of data. So help the folks understand, what you like to do with it.
Well, I think this always alludes to the game within the game topic that Larry and I are always on. So I think you learn a lot about what your pitchers can and can't do and what your hitters can and can't do. But I think it gives you better insight so that when you're watching the game and you're asking yourself, well, why is Justin Verlander throwing more sliders and fastballs today? I also think it's interesting that when you look at this, you look at the heat map and you look at what pitches. Seattle's obviously a fastball first team. I mean, that's what this tells me, number one. They are sitting and looking to feed on fastballs. So that affects pitch sequence. But I think it also kind of plays a hand into some of the recent starts that you've seen out of Verlander and McCullers and them. They seem to be working more on that off-speed pitch with that understanding that fastballs are usually feasted on. Now, I think, and so what this is going to allow most people to do is to get an understanding of how they approach that. But I also feel like, especially on this chart, you'll be able to develop an understanding of what lefties and righties are looking for. But you'll tie it into the game and understand. It's an 0-1 count. What do you expect this starting pitcher to throw? Well, obviously, Luis Garcia is more than likely going to lean slider changeup. They're looking to push that pitch on you because they understand where that WOBA is. Now, he's an exception because all of his pitchers are really good. I think it was also an interesting point, and I'm sure we might get to it or we might not, but like with Luis Garcia being such a good, type of having such a good changeup, does that make Yuli Gurriel more valuable in the lineup than others? Because I know he's had a better season against all speed pitches and fastballs and as compared to his prior years, but it paints a picture and it's going to tell you what the hitters are going to want to look for, and this is what makes baseball tick, so to speak. So you can watch a game over and over again and just watch it for the sake of it, but you can also watch it with the understanding of this data, and then you'll wonder why certain things are happening. Why Jeremy Pena doesn't see fastballs, why a lot of them won't see very many fastballs. But there's also interesting matchups in this as well, because if the chess game is played correctly and you're able to set up situations where your pitchers you just create bad matchups, this is what it comes down to. It's not so much how good of a hitter Jose Altuve is against a mediocre reliever. It's what is the pitch selection for that reliever, and what are the odds that Altuve is going to see this type of pitch and how often, and that's kind of how we operate, and that's what we're really looking at here.
Right, and so Clint, you said it. And that's where we're headed with this, right? So understanding what the batters do well, what the Seattle pitchers do well. Now let's do the same thing for the Houston hitters, right? So here you've got, and notice the red on the fastballs. The Astros just rake on fastballs. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how many fastballs they actually get in this series. And you're like, what do you mean? I mean, I guess the other thing that Clint and I are subtly telling you is postseason baseball is a lot more detail oriented with this stuff than regular 162 games, and somewhat of the 162 games are building to the point where teams actually really understand what their strengths and weaknesses are, and then the postseason is the chess game of playing on your strengths and not playing to their strengths. And if what Clint invited you to do, you keep this data up in front of you as the game goes on, and you're going to say, like, why are they never throwing Altuve a fastball? Well, then you're going to look at this and you're like, well, hell, they shouldn't throw him a four-seam fastball, and they shouldn't throw him a sinker. Okay, well, that makes sense. Now I get it. Why did Jose Altuve end up hitting the Chapman home run to send the Astros to the World Series in 2019? That was a slider, because he didn't want to throw him a fastball, because that's Jose Altuve has been great against fastballs for most of his career. And so this is the way to look at this data. And within this, you can see things like Clint just mentioned. Gurriel's great against changeups, but he's one of the worst on the team against fastballs, right? And so every single one of these things, we have, Christian Vasquez, terrible versus changeups, great against fastballs. So every single one of these numbers leads you down a path of understanding what the players you love, their strengths and weaknesses. So maybe understanding this page helps you then go back to the Seattle hitters page. Like, okay, that player's a lot like, whatever, draw your analogies to the Astros players, but every one of these players has different strengths and weaknesses. Now, there are some blanks in here. This is where the data is saying, like, what I got for Hensley. Hensley just doesn't have enough data points on these other pitches that I felt comfortable with putting him in the database. So for some of these players, the conclusions aren't, we can't reach conclusions, but you're going to understand in his limited time, David Hensley's done a really good job against the fastball from right-handed pitchers. So there you go. So that's go ahead, Clint.
I was just going to say, I don't know if anybody tuned in for the wild card, the wild card series, when you're watching some of these games, but if you're, as a casual fan, if you can't see how different the approach is by pitchers and hitters, it's fascinating. I think one of the most interesting things is watching the Padres and their offensive approach in situations. They hit the slider and they sat off speed and they made the adjustments, and that's what this really comes down to is how well that these hitters can make adjustments in these moments. And it's crazy to think that someone like Matt Scherzer was taken for 6 runs in that game, but the truth is, when you understand what a pitcher's strengths are and you understand that, and you understand, well, I'm not going to be able to launch that baseball, it can change your mindset.
Right.
And so, I think the other thing I just wanted to point out was postseason baseball and the strategy in the game, as Larry said, it's different than regular season. I mean, there are moments where you can sit there and watch, and these guys, Larry and I have always agreed that they're working on pitch sequences. They have a strategy in mind, and I believe that those are the focuses to build into these moments here. So I think you're going to get 2 different products, and it's going to be really fun to watch, and especially when you watch these talented guys start to adjust and make those adjustments so that they can perform and win games, because it's no longer a war of attrition, so to speak.
Hey, Clint, I just realized something. I didn't click the recording on. So is this saving to YouTube? Is it gonna save to YouTube? Can I save it on the YouTube side?
It's streaming live on YouTube, so it should automatically save it.
Okay. We're just going to go forward under that impression. Otherwise, it's going to be a great conversation, but sorry, folks. All right, so let's go to the Astros pitchers. Similar data for the Astros pitchers. Okay, so we're looking at what do the pitchers do well, and what do we see that they have some challenges with? And you can see, the Astros pitchers, really great sliders, and really a lot of them great curveballs. And so I think that's one of the things that makes the Astros pitching really unique is how committed they are to the slider and the curveball. It's been that way for a while now, since Brent Strom has been the pitching coach. and you can see the different pitchers. So you see the strengths and the weaknesses of each one of the pitchers. We're going to get into a little bit of like, okay, some of the consequences of this, but you can see again when you're watching a game, why is Stanek not throwing as many fastballs in the postseason? Well, he knows that the Seattle hitters are hitting the four-seam fastball really well, and he knows that he doesn't have a great. His fastball has gotten hit relatively pretty hard this year, but he knows that his split fingers have been absolutely unhittable, and his sliders have been really good. So I have a feeling that you're going to see a lot more split fingers and a lot more sliders from Ryan Stanek than these percentages would indicate. So that's the sort of thing to be interested in watching as things happen. All right, let's go down. So what we do now, and this happens in every single one of the pitchers has one of these in the series. So this is Justin Verlander. So the data that I showed you right here for Justin Verlander, this data and this data, the lefty data, the righty data, that's this data right here. And then this data is the hitting table coming from right here. And we're going to pull the data from the right-handed pitcher because Justin Verlander is a right-handed pitcher. So we pull the Seattle right-handed pitcher expected WOBA table. That goes down into what this is truly the matchup guide, right? So what we do then is we look at the distribution of the Justin Verlander's pitches and how well those pitches compare to the average expected WOBA, which is 310. And then so we multiply. So we take the 310 minus 291, multiply that by 51%. That's this number right here. Add those up. Then that basically says that when Justin Verlander faces a left-handed hitter, the expected WOBA that hitter would otherwise experience is going to be reduced by 73 points because Justin Verlander is just that good at throwing his pitch mix. Now, I've assumed that Justin Verlander, with this calculation, is going to give every batter the standard pitch distribution that he has. That's not going to happen, but there's no way I can do a calculation like, well, for this batter, he's going to do this. This batter is going to do this. Now, I would expect the Astros have said, hey, our strategy for this batter is, all sliders, all curveballs. Or, they have a strategy for that. And then they can actually do the rest of this calculation based on just that part of the strategy. But so what we do then, so if you understand that part, so these two numbers are the adjustments made to the right-handed hitters and to the left-handed hitters. Then you go down to this table. This is what we do is Julio Rodriguez hits fastballs really well. Multiply that by the 0.514 for 51%. You do that through all four types of pitches that Verlander comes that Verlander comes with and throws, and then you get a number which would have been close to 400, and then you reduce that by the 0.73. Then that's how Julio Rodriguez gets to 30.330. Now that I just took you through the math. Don't worry about them. So if you don't want to hear all that math, don't worry about it. Right, just understand the most important column on this matchup is this last column here, the numbers I put in red. This is telling you versus Justin Verlander how well these batters are going to do in the ALCS if Justin Verlander was throw at them his standard pitch mix, which he's not going to do. He's going to pitch to his strengths against those particular batters. But you notice all the dang blue. This is another way of telling you these batters are really going to struggle against Justin Verlander because Justin Verlander is a really good pitcher, right? And you're going to see a lot of blue in these matchups because we got a lot of good pitchers, and they're going to do really well. And so that's what it looks like for every single one of the pitchers. So then the next thing here is this is all of the Houston hitters versus all the Seattle pitchers. Now, this is the first time I've ever done this. Last year, I gave you some of this data. I basically gave you the kind of data I just showed you for Justin Verlander. This year, I'm giving you every pitcher versus every batter to to the with the only caveat being I left the cells yellow where I don't have enough data to really give you a firm conclusion. So here you go. This is the batters versus Luis Castillo. You notice that Luis Castillo is a really good pitcher, guys, and there's a lot of blue. And overall average, if you just the starters against Luis Castillo, they would project about 306 if you average the numbers that are up here. If you take all the batters, it's 274. So you look at all the numbers, you see who's so from an Astros standpoint, we want to see red in this table, right? Because that means the batters are doing well against these pitchers. But notice, number one, Castillo's going to do well. I may make declarative statements like that. What we're really saying is that this system or would project that those players are going to do well against the Robbie Rays, Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, and then they would struggle. The batters would struggle against Sewell, Munoz, and Castillo. One thing to notice, look at Jordan Alvarez's line here. It's red against everybody. So Jordan Alvarez projects to have a 454 expected WOBA against the starting pitchers of the Seattle Mariners, and he has a 444 against the relief pitchers of the Seattle guys. 310 is average. 444 expected WOBA is it's like Jordan Alvarez. He's the great hitter. So guys, that's where you look at. So what I've also done in this table is I've put in the black box, like you see JJ Matijevic here versus Luis Castillo. A black box around that player's numbers indicate where that player would be a good choice to pinch hit against that pitcher. Okay. Now I assumed that Castillo might be in the game in the 6th or 7th inning still. And the Astros, let's hope it doesn't happen. But if the Astros are down 1-0 and you need to get a hit and you got Chas McCormick up or you've got even Elizabeth Diaz up, JJ Matijevic would be a better choice in that and for a pinch hit situation. So, you can see the players that you would potentially pinch hit for up there. Now, the red cell here means the red border on the cell would mean for that starting pitcher, that player that I projected should be starting would not start. And in this case, Yuli Gurriel would start against Robbie Ray, which is something Clint and I've been saying. Gurriel can start against the lefties because that profile you can go back up to the top, back up to the batting section. You see Gurriel does pretty well against lefties still. So that's how you would make that substitution. Again, against George Kirby, Elizabeth Diaz would be out and Jake Myers would be in. And that's because Jake Myers is really good against one of the pitches that Kirby throws. And I think it's where's Jake? Yeah, so the cutter. Jake Myers, and then this may be a statistical anomaly. So the Astros would have minor league data to understand whether this is true for his time in the minors too. A little bit of caution related to Jake Myers that he's hasn't had probably enough at bats for this to be foolproof. Obviously there's a reason I don't do this early in the season. I'll just say it that way, guys. I want a full season worth of data, and I don't. One could argue that it's probably not even stable through a whole season, but I don't think it's a good thing to project over 3 seasons because I think the talent level or the age effects may impact. So you see all the black boxes here for JJ Matijevic. That's because JJ Matijevic is a superior choice than players that are starting in the starting lineup for a late at bat. And you can say, well, JJ Matijevic is not even going to be on the roster. I'm telling you, by those black boxes, that's why JJ Matijevic should be on the roster because when I'm in the 6th or 7th inning and I need to get a pinch hit, JJ Matijevic may be the guy I want to turn to go get that hit, and then he can go sit on the bench the rest of the game. I want JJ Matijevic to drive in a run. Well, I got a runner at second, and and I'm only down by one or up by one. I mean, we need to make a run. That's what I want to do. Does that make sense, Clint? Does that make sense? Does this table make sense when I
Yes,
describe it
it
that way?
does. It does, and I think one thing that we can look at, and just something I wanted to highlight is how I think we kind of take for granted how good Kyle Tucker is as well.
Yeah.
In a lot of spots. But I think what this also does is this paints a really good picture with the reliever rules of the 3-batter minimum and kind of setting up your strategy to approach that, 4, 5, 6 part of the part of the lineup there.
Right.
And so you have to make a decision, because if you choose to isolate Yordan Alvarez or Kyle Tucker with one of these matchups in terms of trying to find someone who can generate that out, you open the door for one of these right-handed hitters to potentially excel.
Right.
So that's just a really interesting thing, but it also kind of brings in it, and that's kind of where it's gonna be fun to watch. I mean, obviously you have your exceptions. And Munoz and them are pretty good against both sides, but like I said, that's the chess match. That's the part of the thing that we are constantly looking at, and what Larry's always working on. And what you'll understand, and like the JJ Matijevic thing is a perfect example of why postseason baseball is a completely different animal, and how you have to give yourself the opportunity to generate runs any chance you get.
Right. And it's a perfect example of why people need LarryTheGM.com.
Yes, it's a perfect example of why you need this, because it paints a really good picture, and it gives you the also understanding. And I mean, you have to give yourself as many chances as you can when you have them. So knowing what you know, based on all the blue for someone like Mauricio Dubon, why would you even consider it in a position of, I at least get a left-handed bat with pop that I can pitch hit in situations with the with the upside, as compared to what I've seen from a much larger sample size with Dubon.
Right, and so thanks, Clint, for adding that, because that's the other part of this. Ultimately, that roster decision comes down to Dubon, Chevik. Look at Dubon's line. Dubon is never a good choice as a pinch hitter, because every single time you would look at him, every player in the lineup's a better choice as far as to get a hit. I think there is one spot on there that Dubon may actually protect better than Kyle Tucker, but guys, I'm never choosing to take Dubon, put Dubon in and take Tucker out. So, and that's over here against Marco Gonzalez, right? Well, it's not even clear that Marco Gonzalez is going to be on the roster. He's probably going to be kept off the roster versus the Astros, because the Astros generally rake left-handed hitters, and that you can see the few lefties, the two lefties that are on here. Robbie Ray is going to have a real challenge to try to work against the Astros. And so, also, I think that's another reason. I mean, you look at all the righties on this pitching staff. Another reason that having a lefty pinch hit bat makes a lot of sense. All right, I'll shut up about JJ Matijevic, but this is the reason why I'm saying what I'm saying about JJ Matijevic on the roster.
And I was just gonna say, watching, I think what you can do is, if you watch Robbie Ray pitch against the Blue Jays over the weekend, you could kind of see how facing quality hitters was tough for him, especially from that right-handed side. And so he tried to challenge them inside a few times, and it bit him in the rear, because those hitters are good, and they turn around and they pull it down the left field line a few times, and obviously Teoscar Hernandez had a great time with him that day. So that's kind of, if you want an example, a live example of what we're talking about when it comes to how Robbie Ray is going to struggle, you can see how in this lineup at any moment one of these guys can turn it and go yard, especially a Minute Maid. So it's just another way for you to put a visual to that all the red squares that you have, especially from the starters.
Right. So let's look at. I mean, if you look at the I told you that the expected WOBAs versus the starting pitchers, the expected WOBAs versus the relief pitchers. If you weighted that out, this is what you would expect the overall performance. I did basically 2/3 starting pitcher, 1/3 relief pitcher. I just had to pick something there, but you can see who you expect to have an impact. And again, you've got, I mean, guys, I mean, I know somebody can claim I just spend all year beating on Maldonado and Gurriel and to a lesser extent Dubon, but look who's down here at the bottom of this list. Jake Myers hasn't had a whole lot of at bats, and and they sent him to the minors because he was doing so poorly, right? So this is what you would expect to have happen as far as you would expect this offense to be led by Jordan Alvarez and Kyle Tucker, Alex Bregman, and Jose Altuve. Well, you didn't need Larry the GM to tell you that, but I'm telling you that's what the numbers are showing, and it's showing you like your best hopes are for that to happen because the if Mancini does get to play, he's going to be right a little bit above average against Seattle. But also notice that he's going to have to get his hits early. So is McCormick, so is Pena. They're not going to get hits late. But JJ Matijevic, it's the one like not lighter blue, meaning better in this case, is a bat. I mean, again, this data is telling you the same thing. JJ Matijevic versus those relief pitchers is a better option than a whole lot of other people in this lineup. So that's what the take. So if you want to if this whole thing overwhelms you, then just look at this, right? This is going to tell you the same. This is going to tell you the answer, but the data here is something you can actually look at during the game. What does this matchup look like? What's going to happen? What's going to happen here? And what I kind of think I'm going to do on a nightly basis before the game is I'll send you the Justin Verlander and the Seattle starter. I'll send you the starter grids so you see how that's going to be in the game. Otherwise, I mean, I'd be sending 28 grids out. I don't think anybody wants all that. But
I was just going to say, Larry, on that chart right there, I think what's also interesting, and I know that this may be a little more old school in that sense, but I still think it's relevant to this day, is you kind of understand why these guys are in the certain spots that they are in the lineup, why Jordan Alvarez bats fourth, why Tucker's sixth, Bregman's third. Now Altuve leads off. It says they drive the offense, number one, but they also open up opportunities for the guys below in certain situations. So you pick and choose your battles, and inevitably it rolls out to where you end up getting these guys in a situation where next thing you know, you've got runners on first and second with one out, and you're at the top of the lineup. And so that's kind of where the old saying goes, and I tell Larry all the time, is that it's kind of, you just kind of create some chaos. You got to create a little bit of chaos, and you got to give those pitchers something to think about other than delivering a pitch at the plate. But I also kind of like the chart because I think all the data shows you that the Astros are needing to look and feast early on starting pitching. They need to get after it and stay on it, and then allow their bullpen to take them home afterwards. And I think that's obviously been the formula for them all year, but it can't be any more pivotal than it is right now.
Right, and so you see the 302 number. That's the average of all those. That's the average of all these numbers. That's that's saying that of course some of these players aren't going to play, but I mean that tells you the overall quality of the Astros. 14, 15 players versus the Seattle team. So let's look at the two pitching staffs against each other. Similar data that I just showed for the hitters. If you look at the way these pitching staffs are going to form, notice down here, Framber Valdez, that's from that same table. Framber Valdez, relative going to struggle against that Mariners lineup. And you see the Phil Matons, you see Luis Garcia, and you see Jose Urquidy. That's why the decision is between Garcia, Maton, Smith, and Urquidy. Now, I actually have Will Smith twice in this table. This is Will Smith's overall data for the year. This is Will Smith's data as a Houston Astro, right? And I mean, I put out yesterday also another article that talked about Will Smith, and we wrote the days following the trade deadline, fixing Will Smith, the article about how the Astros could fix Will Smith. Yesterday I wrote the articles. Well, did the Astros fix Will Smith? The answer, short answer is looking at this data. Yes, the Astros fixed Will Smith, but I give you more details about how and what exactly they did to help Will Smith be so much. I mean, Will Smith projects to be the third best, the tied for third best pitcher in this series, guys. That's why Will Smith should be on the postseason roster here. But you see again, the pitching for the Mariners. Their top end of their bullpen really really good. In fact, those four, every one of those four is better than their same one in the their Munoz better than Presley. Because Diego Castillo better than Stanek. Murphy better than Will Smith. So their top end of their bullpen is not something we really want to. We don't want to be. We want to be ahead. just say it that way. And we saw that in the last Toronto game, right? The Seattle bullpen kept that game close or kept that game in check and allowed the offense to come back and essentially steal the game that way, right? And that's the only way they were able to do that is when they had such a good bullpen. So there's the pitching, and you can also see why I'm saying that I'm not sure if it's Marco Gonzalez or Chris Flexen. One of those two guys is probably going to be left off, and also Robbie Ray is going to struggle. Kirby, Gilbert, and Ray are starting pitchers in this series. We've got to get after them, just as Clint said. So there you go.
I was going to say that, Larry. I was like, you can look at the chart and you can see how sprinkled in starting pitchers are on the heat map for in all those red, all those red squares as compared to where three of the four starters that we will 90% guarantee we'll see are not there for the Mariners. So that's kind of where we've been. But I also think what's interesting and I feel like we owe a tip of the cap to Javier for being as good as he's been.
Yeah,
he's been exceptional, and Brian Abreu for his improvement.
Yeah, I guess there was a little bit of a Twitter storm today. Like somebody I saying here, like Javier projects to be better than Verlander in the series. Just Christian Javier, best pitcher, best starting pitcher. Like what? Like in the series within this series with this matchup, yeah, Christian Javier is going to rake. So do we want to start Verlander in Game 4? Well, there's other reasons. I'll get into that at some point in the next week or so. Why I don't really want to start Verlander in Game 4. But the other reason I want to start Christian Javier in Game 4. I really want to start Christian Javier in Game 2, but I think it's probably going to start in Game 4, and so you can see what's happening here. All right, so let's do the same exercise for the Seattle hitters. I mean, I kind of told you exactly how the pitchers would do, but you can the Houston pitchers would do, but you can see all the blue. There's a lot of blue on here, and you can see the conclusion I already gave you about Framber Valdez. Framber Valdez going to be challenged against some of these hitters in the series. So you can see how that flows. Again, the Astros bullpen, a lot of blue in that bullpen, and so
and I think the trend continues there, Larry, because you can see where all the blue matches, as you can tell that those are the guys with the best sliders and breaking balls relative to the staff in general. I mean, the argument can be made, Urquidy and Garcia have really good ones, but I mean, across the board, Presley is great with that pitch, and then obviously Verlander and McCullers. And so I think what also this kind of alludes to, and this might be an interesting point and something that we can think about, is how Hunter Brown is used, because he is able to generate that swing and miss on that curveball and be a really good relief pitcher in this situation. So it like I said, it opens your eyes and kind of gives you some questions to ask yourself when you're watching the game.
Correct. All right, so there's that data. So let's go down. You look at the the Seattle projections of the Seattle hitters, and guys, there's a lot of blue on this chart. Seattle hitters are going to struggle against the the number one pitching staff in the major league soccer. So Suarez is probably going to be their brightest hope, and then Carlos Santana. But guys, it's rough against the starters. It's rough against the relievers. It's just rough, and it comes down that number that was 302 for the Astros is 275 for the Mariners here. So it's a challenge. So that's what that turns out to be. So there you go. I mean, there's the meat of the article. What I try to do then is say, hey, the offensive MVPs for the Astros was probably going to be Alvarez. For the Mariners is probably going to be Suarez. The pitching MVPs are likely to be Javier and Presley for the Astros, and Munoz and Castillo. I expect to see them maybe even 4 times in this series. And so because they could pitch in game 1, game 3, game 4, and game 1, game 2, game 3, and game 5 in this series, and still have a day off between every one of those appearances. So I think the Astros are going to win in 4, but I take you through the process. Here's my roster, and here's who I expect. So like the Astros are going to have Dubon on the roster. LarryTheGM would have JJ Matijevic on the roster. And I showed you why as we went. I expect the Astros are going to have Phil Maton on the roster. I actually have a little more hope that they're going to put Will Smith on the roster. I think Dusty's actually going to want a lefty. So maybe I'll be surprised. I think that last spot that we were talking between Garcia, Maton, and who am I thinking about?
Urquidy,
yeah, Garcia, Urquidy, and Maton. I think it'll be Garcia, but you can go back and see that his data and the heat map's a little more favorable. The numbers are a little more favorable. So, guys, if you really understand this data, you'll never watch a postseason baseball game the same way again. You'll be screaming at me through the ALCS like, "Where's my heat map? I need my heat map, Larry." And so I will be getting that out for you. I went through that as I watched the games last year with these heat maps, and I was like, "Man, this is amazing to understand what's happening when you have this heat map in front of you." It makes more sense. So let me know if you see anything wrong in there. I already fixing today. I may have seen something else I need to fix through today just now. But guys, the numbers are pretty close. We're talking the last digit on a couple numbers, maybe shifted a little bit. But there you go. There's the data in this article. Let me know. Reach out to Larry the GM on Twitter. Come to the site, make comments subscribe to the site, and then you'll be able to see and read all these articles, and you'll know when a new one comes out. Clint, any final thoughts?
No, I think the best thing is obviously read the article, go back to the heat maps, and understand and follow them along through a series, and you'll start to see where choices are made and how the Astros exploit the weaknesses of the Seattle Mariners. I also believe the Astros win in 4. I think the Luis Castillo start is going to be the toughest one for them, obviously. But I think that the Astros are in a much better situation than they were in 2021. I mean, they took what was a very difficult and tough bullpen to manage and turned it into a strength. And so we shouldn't sleep on this offense. We've seen them flip a switch and be different on some days, and so I feel like it's going to. I feel like the whole postseason is set up for the Astros to do really, really well and to be able to use this bullpen effectively. It's just this is the best time. Unfortunately, I know it sounds crazy to say that, but this is the best time for Astros baseball because these past 7 years or 6-7 years have been nothing but. What are we doing in the postseason?
Exactly.
So this is a great problem to have, and that's a great way to have to look at it.
Yeah, the regular season essentially becomes training for the postseason, and the real season starts now. So, guys, thank you for joining. Thanks, Clint, for walking through it with me and adding the thoughts. Folks, reach out to us if you have questions. Thank you for your time. Bye bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Larry.
I think someone may have been on. I don't know.
It was me.
Okay, I guess we have an hour. Yeah, we were right at an hour.
That's good though.
Okay, so videos, it's there.
Yep.
And I ended, so I think it'll stop showing us as live at some point, right?
I think it still has us recording.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay.